Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface. But if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges that Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/hauntedukpodcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. This is the Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. Welcome, dear listeners, to our series of short haunts. A shot of scary, just for you. So grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, maybe something stronger, because this is Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts, Remnants from the Past. The occult and witchcraft have been embedded in our culture and history for hundreds of years, and the people who have practiced it over time have often brought unwanted attention to themselves. You only have to do a brief internet search for Matthew Hopkins to begin to understand the persecution that these people suffered. Hopkins was known as the Witchfinder General in the 1640s, but he was only one of many people who were employed to hunt down and kill witches. Thankfully, with our more modern outlook and understanding of the occult, it's not always necessarily seen as a practice of evil intent. White witches tend to be spiritual healers, wise in the ways of the world of spirit, practitioners of incantations and sacred prayers, but even today, there are still many who will roll their eyes when they are introduced to a white witch. In my opinion, if these people are trying to only do good with the abilities they believe they have, then what's the problem? But in the process of beginning a journey into witchcraft, is there a possibility that tampering with spells and incantations which aren't fully understood at the time could bring about entities from another dimension? And could these entities follow their hosts, constantly conjuring up inexplicable paranormal phenomena? Our short haunt for this episode is a fascinating series of stories from Ben, who had a terrifying encounter with something truly horrifying at his family home as a child. But as this story unfolds, you'll find that it becomes quite clear and possible that a member of Ben's family may have been the catalyst for a lot of the paranormal activity which seemed to follow them around. A shining beacon to those in the spirit world, attracting them, drawing them in, encouraging the good to come forward and show themselves, but also having the ability to identify a threat and to disperse it. Let's let Ben take it from here. Firstly, I'd like to say how much I appreciate the show. I stumbled across it recently by complete accident, and I'm addicted. So much so that I've worked almost my whole way through every single episode already. I'd like to take this opportunity to share an experience I had when I was a child. I'm 40 years old now, but even though it happened so long ago, I can still remember the details exactly. I suppose the trauma of what I saw has etched itself into my memory. When I was 9 or 10 years old, myself, my mum, and my 2 sisters, one younger and one older, all lived in a big Victorian 3-story house on a lovely leafy road in Didsbury, Greater Manchester. My mum's bedroom and my bedroom were on the top floor of the house. The second floor had the bathroom and 2 further bedrooms that my sisters occupied. One night at around 2 a.m., I woke up bursting for the toilet. I left my room and began walking down the few stairs towards the second floor where the bathroom was located, directly facing the stairs down from the top floor. As I was halfway down the stairs, I saw movement in the corner of my left eye. The bathroom light was switched on as always, so that we could see at night if any of us children needed to use it, so visibility was good. I stopped, leaned over the banister and looked down towards the second staircase that led from the top floor where I was stood. I was filled with excitement and surprise to see the top of my Gran's head walking up the stairs. I knew instantly it was my Gran, as she had brilliant white permed hair, and she was even wearing the same brightly coloured clothes, but her face wasn't visible as she was looking down at the stairs whilst walking up. I noticed she was holding a plastic orange colander in her left hand and a small black vegetable knife in her right hand. I remembered thinking how strange that was, but as a young child it didn't cross my mind. I was just excited to see my Gran, who I loved dearly, walking up towards my bedroom. I shouted out with excitement, "Gran, what are you doing here?" Then to my utter horror, my Gran stopped walking up the stairs. She moved her head up towards me and locked eyes with mine, and her face was the most demonic, contorted, and downright evil, terrifying face I've ever seen in my 40 years alive. This was definitely not my Gran. I was completely frozen to the spot, unable to breathe or make a sound. I felt locked in place and couldn't take my eyes off this thing. We were no more than 5 meters apart, separated only by a banister and a few steps. Even writing this now has made the hairs on my neck stand up, and I feel the same feeling of dread in my stomach. Suddenly, the face snarled at me with a hissing sound, then looked back down towards the stairs and carried on walking up towards me, but it now seemed to be moving much faster. At that moment, I screamed the loudest scream I've ever done, turned around, and ran back up the stairs to the top floor, running towards my mum's bedroom. My mum had a deadbolt lock on the inside of her room for privacy, and I smashed that lock straight off as I ran into her room. My mum woke up in fright with me running in screaming and crying. I remember telling her what had just happened, and she told me I was just having a nightmare and to get into her bed with her. After a while, I somehow managed to get back to sleep. It wasn't until a good few years later in my teens that my mum happened to bring up the story of that night, and she told me that the following morning she'd woken up early before myself and my sisters and had gone downstairs to prepare our breakfasts and school lunches. When she walked into the kitchen, every single cupboard door was open, utensils were scattered all over the countertops, and sat in the middle of the kitchen floor was a plastic orange colander and a black vegetable knife. She said she knew there was something bad in that house, and she felt and experienced a few things herself, but wouldn't and didn't say anything back then as we were all so young. My Gran was still alive at the time and lived on the other side of Manchester, so there was no way she would have come over as she didn't drive. She was the sweetest, most loving lady and would never have done something to scare her grandchildren. Whatever that was, I feel it wanted to use my Gran's image to get close to me, and God only knows what could have happened if it had succeeded. I simply dread to think. We didn't live in the house for that long, as my mum was a senior staff nurse and we would often have to move houses depending on which hospitals she would get placements at. I've had a couple of other experiences in my life, but absolutely nothing as terrifying as that. So it's now that I need to mention that my mum was very sensitive to the paranormal. Before she had children and became a nurse, she was actually a white witch. She'd studied everything, even the occult, of which I still have her paperwork and notes on. I found these whilst clearing her house after she passed away towards the end of 2023. Because of her being able to pick up on these types of phenomena and her deep interest in things such as the occult, I often wondered whether that made us as a family more susceptible to paranormal disturbances. My mum had a fascinating life, with many strange and hard-to-explain experiences. These started when she was a young girl. She lived in a 2-up, 2-down house, which was basically a small terraced house that had seen much better days. Apparently, the upstairs had a very oppressive feeling, and my grandparents would often find my mum playing with a little girl. I suppose this could have been a case of imaginary friends, but my mum always swore the child was real. Fast forward a few years, and her parents unfortunately separated. This had a big impact on her, to the point that during her teens she became a bit rebellious. She had a fascination with witchcraft and ended up studying it to an almost unhealthy point. She even told me that one time she had an argument with her mum's new boyfriend who she hated. She then placed a curse on him in anger. Within a day or so of doing this, he was involved in a very serious car accident. As if this wasn't terrible enough, her own mother was also in the car and was lucky to escape without any real lasting damage. Mum said at this point she'd scared herself, realizing that innocent people could get hurt and that it wasn't always possible to control an outcome. So she stopped studying dark crafts and focused on the good, white witchcraft if you like. I always felt a little embarrassed growing up if my mum ever spoke about it. I'd think that it was just a load of garbage, but one weird thing she did stuck in my head, and I can't explain it to this day. I caught viral meningitis when I was a teenager and was in so much pain, I was absolutely convinced I was going to die within the next few minutes. I was sat in the local hospital's accident and emergency department with my mum, and seeing how utterly helpless and in pain I was, she put her hands over my face and muttered something. Slowly, within a few minutes, the feeling of my head wanting to explode began to dissipate. I'm convinced she did something to help me, but I have no idea what. Anyway, Mum left that lifestyle behind and decided she wanted to become a nurse, so she studied hard and achieved her goal. As children, we didn't really see much of Mum. She was always at work, and we would be looked after by my gran. Unfortunately, my mum had quite a serious accident at work, which involved 2 student nurses and a bariatric patient in a hoist. The result left my mum with a broken spine as she desperately tried to stop the accident from occurring. Mum's injuries were serious, and she ended up having to go to Hope Hospital in Salford for spinal surgery. At the time, it was well before the refurbishment of the hospital, and Mum had been put in a particularly old part of the building. She told us that the night before her surgery, she was crippled with anxiety and fear. Thoughts such as whether the surgery would be a success and whether she would even walk again, let alone work, would flood her mind. She said that night was the longest of her life, and she just couldn't sleep. The area her bed was in had about 8 people in beds in total, so it wasn't a big ward. All the lights were out except for my mum's reading light. It was the early hours of the morning, and for some reason my mum was reading a Bible that was on the table next to her bed. She always said she had no idea why she chose to read it. Maybe it was just a distraction technique, who knows. Anyway, she said the ward was so silent you could have heard a pin drop, and the nurse on duty was sat at the nurse's station just outside the door to the ward. As Mum was turning the page, she felt a presence at her side, as though someone was stood next to her. She looked to her left and saw a woman in an old Victorian-style nursing uniform walking out of the wall by the head of the bed. The Victorian nurse then stopped, level with my mum, and pressed one hand down on her left shoulder with real force. This left my mum absolutely frozen in fear. Surely this couldn't be real, she thought. But not only could she see this woman, she could feel the pressure of her pushing her down into the bed. This must have happened very quickly, but Mum said it felt like everything was happening in slow motion at the time. The nurse then lifted her hand off my mum's chest, walked to the foot of her bed, stopped, turned, and looked straight into my mum's eyes. She put one finger up to her lips and quite sternly motioned to shush. Before turning and disappearing through the wall opposite. Well, the fear of Mum's operation had certainly gone at this point, being replaced with absolute horror at what she'd just witnessed. Fortunately, though, Mum's operation went to plan, though it was a long procedure and recovery took almost 2 years in total. Mum told us that the day she was leaving hospital, she felt compelled to ask the nurses if they'd ever seen anything on that ward before, and unsurprisingly, they described this ghostly, stern-looking nurse. If I remember correctly, they'd even given her a nickname. Nurses are a different breed, that's for sure. Shortly before she passed away due to a terminal illness, I asked my mum if she could give me a sign that she was still with me after she passed. This was before Christmas 2023, and she said if she knew how, she absolutely would. And I believe that she has. For context, my mum came to live with myself and my wife during her end-of-life care. She would always sit in a recliner chair next to my bay window with her feet up on the footstool, looking outside and watching the world go by. I decided to put a CCTV camera in the living room, as Mum was having numerous visits every day from the palliative care team, and we all felt better knowing we could keep an eye on her if we were out. The nurses were all fine about it too, and Mum felt safer knowing that we could keep an eye on her for emergencies. She passed away at 2:09 a.m. on the 29th of October 2023, so you can see the timestamps on the CCTV footage which I've sent you, and not long afterwards. There are a number of things which have been caught on camera since her passing, including a black mass which appears to be in and around the chair, along with the sounds of creaking, as if someone is standing up on the wooden floor, then the black mass disappears almost instantly. I've replayed this bit over and over again, and it still blows my mind. Then at the end of the clip, the camera begins to track left, as though it's following someone walking. It's also caught noises and orbs coming from the location of her bed. The most disconcerting evidence, though, came on the day of her funeral. Our family was stood in the living room talking to each other when suddenly, my mum's wheelchair started to roll across the room by itself. All of this was caught on CCTV. There's even a video in night vision mode where you can see my mum's hospital bed and wheelchair in the back left corner. Then something triggers the camera's motion sensor, and you can hear banging coming from the room. But for me, the most moving footage was the one captured just a matter of days after her passing. In my opinion, there's absolutely no way of explaining what was caught on camera. Briefly, I believe it's my mum sat in her favourite chair, standing up and walking out of the room, all captured by a motion sensor CCTV camera that has AI technology which stored the event as human movement. It's even captured the sound of her walking out of the room on the wooden floor, and the camera moves to follow her out. I'm still convinced that was my mum. But there was one other experience which happened shortly after her passing, which was witnessed by my wife, Maria. Myself and my wife Maria were sat in the living room talking. The TV was switched off and the living room door was wide open. My wife got up to go to the downstairs toilet, and as she stood up, she happened to glance over at the TV and saw the reflection of my mum stood in the hallway through the living room door. She was wearing a white nightdress, which she always used to wear when she stayed with us towards the end. My wife was stunned, and she looked around the door quickly, but nothing was there. I remember her reaction being so genuine, as she had never experienced anything paranormal before in her life. She's now a believer after the things she's experienced since my mum passed away. The activity seems to have slowed down a lot now, but we still have the odd thing happen, especially when my daughter comes to stay. Keep up the amazing work. Take care. Ben. A truly compelling and amazing set of stories, I think you'll all agree. Could the sheer knowledge and experience which Ben's mother amassed over the years have enabled her to continue to keep in contact with her family after her death? The team at Haunted UK Podcast have seen the CCTV footage which was kindly sent over by Ben, and it really is astonishing. But in keeping with Ben's wishes, we will not be sharing this footage due to its private and personal nature. This does pose some very interesting questions though. Questions which we began to ask at the start of this episode. Could exposure to writings and practices of black and white magic have the effects of being seen by not only good spirits, but bad ones like the terrifying doppelganger type entity which was making its way up the stairs towards a petrified young Ben? Was this some type of residue from the studies and practices which Ben's mum had delved into? Or was that entity already in the house, brought into our visual world by the same processes? It's quite clear that she believed so sincerely in her abilities that they even seem to have influence over Ben's condition when he was in accident and emergency. And if the CCTV footage is anything to go by, she's given Ben a number of signs that she's still very much around. So are these experiences anything you can relate to? Have you experienced strange entities taking on the forms of the ones you love? Have you or anyone you know studied the occult, white, or black magic? If the answer is yes, then what experiences have you had? And last of all, do you have CCTV in your house? And have you checked it recently? If not, why not go and check it right now? And look carefully, because you might be shocked by what you see. And if that's the case, then the next person whose story could feature as a short haunt could be you.